At this point, I'd like to invite Brad Dirksen to come forward. He will be introducing the next session with Mark Daley.
I had left my notes on the podium. I don't know where they went.
Sure.
Hi, everyone. My name's Brad. I had notes. They have disappeared.
I don't have them.
You don't have
I
them?
don't have them.
Okay.
Oh, okay. There's more at the desk. I can grab.
Okay. But you're doing this.
Yes.
Faizan, would you? There's a second set of notes at the reg desk. Could you grab those for me? Thanks. I'm going to do a little song and dance routine to fill the time. Actually, I'll spare you that agony, but I'd also just like to welcome everyone. It's great to see such a full room here. It's not often that we're beyond capacity in this space, so it's wonderful to see all of you. You could all join us. We're queuing up. Our first presenter is going to be joining us via Zoom, and so there are, as you will have already noticed, screens around the room, so feel free to position your chair in whatever way you're comfortable and can see a screen that is nearest you. Our presenter this morning is Mark Daley, who will be speaking on frictionless discovery.
Yeah, you can hear us.
Mark was appointed as, Mark comes to us from Western University, and Mark was appointed as Western's first ever Chief AI Officer on a 5-year term in October of 2023.
Yeah. Okay.
Mark's a respected researcher in the field of neural computation. And their career includes a tenure as Vice President of Research at CIFAR, which is a world-renowned institute supporting AI research and leading Canada's national AI strategy. Additionally, Mark is a multidisciplinary scholar and has held cross appointments in several departments across their campus, including computer science, mathematics, statistics and actuarial sciences, biology, electrical and computer engineering, and epidemiology and biostatistics. So truly multidisciplinary. So I would like to welcome Mark, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I am going to share some slides here. Are we okay?
Yeah.
Can you say yes, Will?
I'm going to assume that's a yes, and just proceed. You can stop me if not. This is a chart that shows human research productivity, the gray line, plotted against AI research productivity. And we measure productivity in terms of numbers of papers published, number of patents filed. These things are all roughly proxies for each other to a first approximation. And we note that human research output goes up by about 4% per year, which is a lot. But starting in 2025, it started to look like AI research output was going up exponentially. And when I first started showing this plot, people were skeptical, to say the least. You're like, Mark, I think you may be overstating the case. I don't know if you should be showing the slide. I'm going to make the case today that for some disciplines, we're already past the line.
Okay, so this is a different
exponential
meter.
curve intersects with human capability.
This is another one.
Yeah,
So let's have a look at some examples
that's
of
what I was
where
asking her.
AI is at.
Oh, why don't we just join this?
2 years ago, DeepMind
Sorry.
entered a system into the International Math Olympiad that was specifically designed to do competition level mathematics. Now, competition level mathematics is challenging. You get 7 to 10 questions in natural language, and the questions require a broad knowledge of mathematics, but they also require a huge amount of creativity. The whole point is that they're not textbook problems. DeepMind's entry into the IMO got a silver medal. It was 1 point short of a gold medal. This past year, got some noise. This past year, both OpenAI and DeepMind entered general purpose reasoning systems into the IMO, and both systems got a gold medal. If you're a human and you get a gold medal, you will have Stanford and Caltech fighting over who's going to give you the biggest scholarship to come to their school. So this is a significant accomplishment, and these were general purpose reasoning systems. These same systems that are competing at the IMO can give you a great chocolate chip cookie recipe. International Collegiate Programming Contest. The questions are really hard. If you're a programmer, you should go and have a look and see how many of the questions you can do. They're so hard last year that there was no human competitor who was able to get all 12 correct. OpenAI's entry, which was again a general purpose reasoning system, got all 12 questions. Matrix multiplication is a fundamental computational operation that happens all over our world. It's critical for neural nets themselves. It's critical for numerical weather simulation. It is used in so many places that finding an algorithm that allowed you to multiply complex valued matrices more efficiently would actually have a huge impact on the carbon footprint of computation. Since 1969, humans have been trying to find a better algorithm than Straussen's algorithm from 1969 for doing general purpose matrix multiplication. Generation of mathematicians, applied mathematicians, computer scientists have tried. No one has been able to do it. DeepMind's AlphaEvolve found a faster algorithm for complex valued matrix multiplication in 8 hours. So that's a few decades of bright humans trying really hard and failing, and in 8 hours, a machine was able to accomplish that. If you work in chemistry or material science, you're probably aware there's a whole new genre of literature in self-driving labs. So you have a system where the AI system reads the literature, triages open problems and says, that problem looks tractable but impactful, I'm going to work on that, designs an experiment, carries out the experiment in the self-driving lab, gets the results, is disappointed like a human scientist because results are never exactly what you want them to be, goes back through the cycle, revises, and does exactly what a human scientist would do until you've got results that you think are publishable, and then it writes those up into a manuscript. So truly closed cycle end-to-end discovery being done by AI. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner, that image, there was a time when if you were a bright young undergraduate student and you wanted to get a research experience in chemistry, you could go to the head of the lab and say, hey, can I just wash glassware? In the world we're in now, even the undergrad assistant who's washing glassware has been replaced by a labware refreshment robot. This is a really cool result from DeepMind. They took one of their general purpose AIs, so it was a model that was trained on some rough approximation of the whole internet and a bunch of other stuff. And then they fine-tuned it using cell expression data. And if you're a molecular biologist, the cell expression data was actually really simple. It was just single cell expression data, and for each cell they give the LLM some metadata, like what type of cell it is, and then they just give a list from the most expressed to least expressed protein in that particular sample, which seems pretty simple. You shouldn't be able to learn a ton of molecular biology just from a list of most expressed to least expressed protein, and yet what they came up with is a model that understands startlingly much about cellular physiology. And so they tested this. There's a particular type of tumor cell, and they said to the model, this tumor cell doesn't present antigens, so the immune system can't recognize it as a tumor cell. What could I do to induce this type of cell to present antigens. And the model came up with an answer, and they went and implemented that in the wet lab and discovered that the model is correct. So this particular model is 27 billion parameters. If you run an 8-bit quantized version of it, which is still just about as good as the full thing, I can run it on the MacBook Air that I am talking to you from right now. So I can take this model with me, and it's open source, so anyone can use it, and it's incredibly powerful. If anyone here has ever done a systematic review, you are probably aware that they are a ton of work. If you've ever read a systematic review, you understand how important they are to a discipline, because they take all of the existing literature and they categorize it systematically. You may disagree with the particular categorization, but the point is you're taking the broad literature, you're categorizing it systematically, and so you have here's everything that's been done in the field, here it is in a nice, tight, coherent intellectual framework. Doing that as a human takes, as a group of humans, no one does this alone, takes hundreds to thousands of human hours. It's really arduous work. It's really important because these papers are real contributions to the community, but they're not easy. This group here, using a model that is now 5 generations old, it was OpenAI's 03, developed a framework for doing AI systematic reviews, and then got a group of human experts and asked those human experts across 7 review domains to judge an AI-generated systematic review against a human-generated systematic review. And what they found was consistently within statistical error, human experts preferred the AI-generated systematic reviews to the human-generated systematic reviews. And instead of 1 to 1,000 hours of human labor, it cost 1 hour of AI labor. And so you now live in a world where you can get a systematic review on any topic you want, no matter how niche. You just have to pay OpenAI $200 a month for their top tier service, so you get access to GPT 5.4. Another really nice molecular biology breakthrough, also from DeepMind, alpha genome. You can take a megabase of DNA, put it into alpha genome, and alpha genome can tell you things about the DNA that you would expect it to be able to tell you from just primary sequence, like here's a promoter site. But it can also tell you things that you wouldn't expect necessarily that primary sequence alone would be able to tell you. So you can give it a mutated piece of DNA, and it can say, this piece of DNA is coiled in the chromatin, is coiled around this particular histone core with this acetylation on the tail of the histone. So it's actually showing there's a connection between genetics and epigenetics that's even deeper than what we thought. So cool party trick here from a scientific standpoint, but it's also telling us that there's a bunch of unknown things we need to investigate at the intersection of genetics and epigenetics. Closer to my own discipline, I'm a theoretical computer scientist, so essentially a branch of math. Terence Tao and Sir Timothy Gowers are both Fields medalists. Fields Medal is, of course, the equivalent of a Nobel Prize for pure mathematics, because there is no Nobel Prize in mathematics. And these are 2 social media posts where you have Fields medalists openly talking about how they have started to use AI in their practice of mathematics. So on the right there, Sir Timothy is talking about working through a mathematical object. So as a mathematician, you come up with some ideas and you write down some definitions, and then you do some calculations and sort of think about these things and try to come up with some ideas for what you think might be a theorem or a proposition. And so he was still at this ideation phase, and he shared the model with the abstraction he created with GPT 5.4. And he asked it, what do you think of this? And it found a lemma from another branch of mathematics that Sir Timothy admits, like, I didn't know that off the top of my head, and said, actually, if you use this lemma, then you can prove this other lemma, and then you can get to the theorem that you wanted. And Sir Timothy said, like, don't worry, I would have got there myself eventually. But the point was that he didn't. The point was that the AI got there for him with his guidance. That was last year, though. This year, things are different. Paul Erdős was one of the most important mathematicians of the 20th century. He was so prolific that mathematicians even today measure ourselves by collaboration distance from Paul. So it's like degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon in Hollywood. It's degrees of separation by a co-publication with Paul Erdős. So my Erdős number is 2, that's a flex. When he died, he left about 1,000 problems open. And these problems were really hard because Erdős had a reputation of being very smart, well-earned, but he also had a lot of people in his orbit who were incredibly accomplished and smart mathematicians. So when these problems were left open, it meant that Paul and all of the people in his orbit looked at these problems and said, I think these are too hard for me. So when I was a grad student, if you solved an Erdős problem, you were getting a tenured grad position at an R1 university, almost for sure. This was a great way to make your career. So people were highly incentivized to solve these problems. Since January of this year, 4 Erdős problems have been autonomously solved by AI. So that's AI where there hasn't been human help. This isn't AI assisting a human. This is you just give the problem to the AI and it solves it. And these were unsolved problems. A couple generations of human mathematicians were highly incentivized to solve them and hadn't been able to. And now we have a machine solving them. And if you're not a mathematician, you might think, oh, well, that sounds kind of, that just sounds like brute force, but it's not. Mathematical proofs of this nature, especially proving something that's never been proven before, that's not a party trick. That's not a stochastic parrot. That's genuine creativity. Meta measures progress in autonomous software engineering and AI, and they measure it based on taking a whole bunch of tasks and asking how long on average would it take a competent human software engineer to perform this particular task. And in 2020, the best an AI could do is about 4 seconds. So it could like open a folder and then it's done. By the end of 2025, we had systems that were capable of doing tasks that would take a competent human engineer between 4 to 6 hours. And then in December of 2025, something really changed. In November of 2025, when I used tools like Claude Code or OpenAI's Codex, which are both agentic AI platforms for software engineering, I got the result I was looking for maybe about 20% of the time, and close to 80% of the time, it didn't work. It was flawed in ways that required me more effort to fix than to just go back and write it de novo. So they were interesting tech demos, but they weren't particularly useful tools. Over the month of December, we went from interesting tech demo to about 85% works first time, does exactly what it's supposed to do. So right now, while I'm talking to you, I have 4 agents writing research code for me. So I'm being super productive. I'm giving a talk and I'm doing research at the same time. I'm actually doing 4x research because I've got 4 agents writing code. And very likely, 3, maybe even 4 of those products are going to be immediately useful without any modification. Boris is the head of Claude Code. That's Anthropic's software engineering tool. And he posted at the end of last year, in the last 30 days, 100% of my contributions to Claude Code were written by Claude Code. I have not written a single line of code. My team has not written a single line of code. So someone responded with the obvious Terminator meme saying, like, isn't this how we get Skynet, recursive self-improvement? And no, this isn't how we get Skynet, but this is the first time in human history where we have a product that writes the next version of itself. No more humans in the loop. Every version of Claude Code since the end of November 2025 has been written by Claude Code itself. The human's job is to let it know what other humans think. No, we don't like this feature, we need this other new feature, but the actual coding is done by Claude Code itself. You're only going to read one thing about AI and science. This would be my recommendation. So this is a paper with several top scientists. Sir Timothy Gowers is on there again, you'll know. And each section is a top scientist walking you through how they used AI to discover something new in their field. So these aren't toy examples. This isn't, I used AI to do 2 + 2 is 4. This is, here's a new result that I'm proud of and I'm going to publish. Tells me something new about my field, and here's how I got there working with AI. And you can see that each of the scientists takes a different approach to using AI. So it's not just a neat paper to read in terms of, wow, look what AI can do. It shows you different methods of interacting with it, different processes and preferences. And so it really gives you a good view of what the state of the art was at the end of November. Brian Spears, who's in the bottom left there, does plasma physics at Lawrence Livermore National Labs, and he's got a section of the paper. It's really beautiful numerical simulation results, and he concludes, if I'd done this the old-fashioned way, it would have taken me 1 to 2 months working with 2 postdocs. One is a theoretician, and one is an expert in numerical methods. And so that's 3 to 6 months of human effort, human time, versus what he was actually able to do, which is accomplish all of that in 6 hours. His conclusion isn't, well, I guess physicists are going to be replaced by robots. His conclusion is, just wait until I get my postdocs up to speed. So if you see Brian talk, and there's videos of him on YouTube, his whole approach is, I am so excited because I am going to discover so much more physics than I thought I would be able to discover before I die. This is amazing. And like, I feel that same level of excitement. So his time to discovery has gone from 6 months to 6 hours, and he's thinking, there's so many more breakthroughs I'm going to be able to make because I have this super intelligent system. So, broadly speaking, what does that mean for us? What's next? AAAI is one of the top AI conferences in the world, very selective. And if you're not a computer scientist, you may not realize that we prefer conference publications. Journal publications don't count for much. So conferences are strictly peer reviewed and pretty exclusive. AAAI announced they were going to use AI in the peer review system. Not that they were going to replace human reviewers with AI, but each paper would get human reviewers and also an AI reviewer. And predictably, the community went kind of nuts for all sorts of reasons. They ran the experiment, though, and what they found was that the AI reviewers were often better than the human reviewers. More reliable, more accurate, and got all the reviews in on time. So maybe this isn't such a bad idea. The EU has launched their RAISE platform. That's Resource for AI and Science. So this is a broad framework for how they are going to start integrating AI into the research endeavor in Europe. It's a relatively small amount of funding for the size of what they're trying to do, but it's a first step. Meanwhile, south of the border, the US has launched the Genesis mission. This is being led by Dario Gil, who's previously of IBM. And they are putting a lot of money and a lot of focus. In some sense, you see the apparatus of science funding in the US is making a huge bet on AI-assisted science being future science. So really thinking that in a handful of years, there won't be such a thing as science without AI. And this is me at a G7 meeting trying to convince the G7 countries plus Spain and the EU to cooperate on AI and science. And we did actually come out of that meeting with 3 concrete commitments. A commitment to create a talent hub so we can share expertise and talent, a commitment to work towards data standards so that it was easier for us to share data across borders through the G7, EU, and Spain, and a commitment to have the hard conversation about the ethics of AI in science. Where should we be using AI? Where should we not allow the use of AI? After seeing all of those receipts as a researcher, I sometimes feel a little bit like this tweet here. It says, you're going to need new skills to survive the post-artificial general intelligence economy. Just like 1920s draft horses had to learn how to drive motor buses and assemble radios. And the analogy here is, we're not humans anymore, we're the draft horses. And I don't totally believe this, but there is a world where we allow that to happen. So what's actually going on here? I think what's happened is nothing short of the commoditization of intelligence. So we have taken intelligence, which feels special to us, and made it something that anyone can have for the price of GPU rent. And that's hard for us because so much of our mythology, so much of our narrative about ourselves is rooted in our intelligence. Descartes is famous for saying, I think, therefore I am. That is a strong normative statement about what it means to be human. He didn't say I'm kind, therefore I am. I build communities, I exist relationally, therefore I am. Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. And that crystallizes the Enlightenment view of the fundamental conceit of anthropocentrism, which really goes back to the Greeks and the Babylonians before them, which is, we're smart. We're the smartest, and therefore we are entitled to cut down trees, sorry, squirrels, raccoons, and put up buildings because we're the smartest. So much of our sense of self, so much of our sense of what we're entitled to do to our natural environment comes back to, but we're the smartest. Intelligence feels sacred. Intelligence feels divine. It gives us rights. I have a manifest destiny because I'm smart. And that worked up until 2 years ago, because the only source of intelligence that we have ever had during our entire evolutionary history is other humans. That's it. There was no other way to get intelligence. And if you wanted high intelligence, the only way to do that was to have a big enough population of humans that you would get some 2, 3, 4 sigma outliers. So we really started to internalize intelligence and humanity, and they become commingled. And nowhere is this more prevalent than on a university campus, where you've got a bunch of people who are very proud of the fact that they are smart and they know things. And knowing things hasn't been super interesting since Gutenberg, and certainly not super interesting since Wikipedia. But being a collection of smart people, that had value. Universities are collections of intelligence. Some young people, some older people, but we have a big collection of intelligence here on our campus. If machines are intelligent, What does that do to our value proposition? If every undergraduate student knows that their mobile phone is smarter than the smartest professor in the university, how does that change our self-image? How does that change what we do? How does it change our value proposition to society? We can look at the numbers. So IQ is imperfect, but it is a good measure of G factor. And a majority of psychologists will say, in terms of psychometrically valid metrics for what we roughly think of as problem-solving ability, IQ is about as good as we can get for all of its flaws. So if you take the Mensa Norway IQ test, the same IQ test you can give a human, and you take a version that's never been online, so you know the AI hasn't trained and cheated and memorized the answers. If you gave that IQ test to frontier models in 2024, the summer of 2024, the smartest model had an IQ of about 91, which is below average. You repeat that same test in late 2025, and the smartest model has an IQ of 142, which is 2 points beyond genius. That model is now 2 generations old. If we were to repeat this test again, we're probably not going to get 142. We're probably going to get an increasing sequence of these machines are getting smarter and smarter and smarter. And I'm not saying they're smart in all the ways that a human is smart. I'm not saying they're a replacement for a human. I'm saying that G factor, general purpose intelligence, general problem solving ability is measurably getting better. And that's why we saw the results earlier where open research problems are now being solved by machines. So what does this mean? Josh there was a child chess prodigy. There was a movie about him in the 1990s, Searching for Bobby Fischer, and he was on a podcast a couple of years ago, and they asked him, so, what do you think about AI? And Josh's response was, what do you think I think about AI? I have spent 4 decades of my life living, breathing, making chess my whole world. Chess was everything to me. I studied, I grinded. This was everything to me to get to a level where I'm one of the best entities on planet Earth at playing this important game. And let's talk about AlphaZero. So AlphaZero is one of DeepMind's deep neural nets, and AlphaZero learns to play a game from scratch. Previous neural net-based game playing systems learned by studying human games first. So if you're going to make a neural net-based chess game, chess engine, the chess engine would sort of ingest every human chess game ever played as training data, and so it would learn to play like humans. AlphaZero doesn't learn that way. AlphaZero learns to play by playing against itself. So when it starts, it doesn't even know how the chess pieces move. There's a supervisor program that just tells it, no, that's an illegal move, you're not allowed to do that. So AlphaZero learns to play chess just by playing against itself. It's never seen a human play chess. And in 3 hours, it's better at chess than any human being who has ever lived. So Josh's point is, if you think that's only going to happen to chess, that's a really brave position to take, because you're probably wrong. This is Lee Sedol, not a chess player, but a Go player. In 2016, 10 years ago, DeepMind challenged Lee Sedol to play against AlphaGo, which was a predecessor of AlphaZero. And Lee Sedol immediately accepted. And the Korean media interviewed him and said, so, are you going to win? Are you going to beat the machine? And he was pretty arrogant. He's like, yeah, of course. Go isn't chess. It's much harder. It requires creativity. It requires the spark of human ingenuity. No machine will ever beat a top human at the game of Go. And he lost the first 3 out of 5 games to technology that's a decade old now. After game 3, he comes out. This. And the first thing he does is he apologizes to humanity. And you feel for him in the moment. But also, I don't define my humanity on how well I play Go, so I didn't quite relate with him. But he only ended up winning 1 out of the 5 games, and there's no Go system now, or there's no human that can defeat the top Go systems now here in 2026. So there is a nice little personal piece on him in the New York Times over a year ago now. Defeated by an AI, a legend in the board game Go warns, get ready for what's next. And that makes sense. Lee Sedol defined himself, his sense of self, as I'm really smart and I'm really good at this board game that has high cultural context and that humans value being able to play well. And so he constructed this narrative around like this is my values in society. This is what I do. This is why I'm important. And then he got beat by a machine. And he realized this thing that I worked so hard at, that I value so much, now everyone can have it. So if you are an outlier, if you are like 4 Sigma outlier, if there's someone in the room with an IQ of 260 or higher, then I think it's okay to feel threatened by AI. Because something that was unique value you were able to offer to the world is now going to be as available as running water. And so that unique thing that you had to offer is no longer a unique thing you have to offer. But the story is different with the entire rest of humanity. The story for the entire rest of humanity is on the right-hand side of this plot. And on the right-hand side of this plot, you see the level of play amongst professional Go players in tournaments. And it goes back to 1950, and you can see between 1950 and the mid-2010s, the level of play is pretty much stagnant. There's some variance, goes up and down. There are some outliers, like Lee Sedol, but it's flat. And it's probably flat for much longer. We just don't have data prior to 1950. And this didn't surprise anyone, because Go is over 1,000 years old. We know how to play Go. We know how to train young people how to play Go. This is a solid game in some sense, right? And then AlphaGo beats Lee Sedol. And what happens? Within months, almost all of the top Go players in the world start training against AI. And the level of play in human versus human competition, this is not human versus machine, the level of play in human versus human competition starts going up after 70, probably much longer, years of stagnation. So while Lee Sedol feels threatened, that distribution of here's how good the best humans are at playing Go, in a handful of years, it shifted up 2 standard deviations. So if you teach people complex, cognitively demanding tasks like playing Go, you have evidence here that a really good AI tutor can get you what an education theorist would recognize as Bloom's 2 sigma effect. By doing one-on-one tutoring, you can really raise the mean ability of a population versus just teaching everybody in a classroom. So while Lee Sedol is threatened, the entire rest of humanity has opportunities here. Now, how do we make good on those opportunities? I'm going to share something else where I have investigated that from the standpoint of a little bit of economics. So there's a paper on SSRN you can read if you really want the details, but the short version is, if we actually do create machines that can do general purpose research, at some point, they might get good enough that they can substitute for human researchers. So in some disciplines like mine, like math, we've already seen examples where they actually can substitute for human researchers. In other disciplines, it's harder. So for each discipline, you get this number, sigma, the coefficient, these elasticity of substitution. So if sigma is greater than 1, it means actually the AI does a slightly better job. If sigma is less than 1, it means the human does a better job. So what happens in a world where sigma is greater than 1? The bigger sigma is, the better the AI does, and the cheaper it is, the more incentivized I am as a researcher who lives and dies by how much output do I have, the more incentivized I am to just push things out to the AI. Why would I do it myself when the AI could do it? What happens is the tasks that the AI is good at, more and more get outsourced to the AI. Because I need to write papers as fast as possible, because my colleague down the hall is writing papers as fast as possible, and I'm competing with her for grants. And the stuff the AI does is the stuff that I actually love doing as a researcher. Data analysis, writing code, drafting papers, thinking through literature reviews. And the stuff that's left for me is primarily accountability, because the machine can't be accountable. So I still have to do safety oversight in my lab. I have to make sure we have ethics compliance. I have to make sure animal care is being done right. But none of those things are the reasons why I got into research. The stuff that's being outsourced is the stuff that I actually love doing. And the stuff that I get to retain is the oversight and compliance stuff. So if this world comes to pass, and if we don't change our incentives, and we get extremely involved in AI, this is the world that's going to come to pass. As a tenured researcher, I go from writing and thinking and mentoring grad students to primarily being a manager who worries about approval and orchestration and compliance. And it's an even worse story if you're a young researcher. If you're an early career researcher, what's going to happen is you are competing for tenure and prestige and grants with all the other early career researchers. And an early career researcher that is at an institution that can provide a huge amount of funding for GPU time, AI, right? So you can outsource more stuff to AI. That cohort is going to pull away from everybody else because they're going to be exponentially more productive. What happens to graduate students? If I'm outsourcing all of the research work to an AI, what do I need a graduate student for? A graduate student is an unreliable mechanism for doing research because I'm training them how to do research. The whole point is it's an apprenticeship. The first day a PhD student shows up, they don't necessarily know how to do research. Part of my job as a professor is to teach them how to do research, but that's time consuming and slow. And if I'm competing with my friend down the hall who is just outsourcing all of that to AI, I'm going to get crushed. Do I want to live in this world? No, because I love interacting with grad students. But right now, my incentives as a researcher are publish more, get more citations, get more grant dollars. And taking an additional grad student when I could just spend that money on GPU credits is actually economically irrational. So an economically rational actor is going to stop hiring grad students. And then at the level of granting systems, those investigators who have high prestige will get more grant dollars. This is already true. That will let them buy more AI compute, which will let them be exponentially more productive, which will yield more prestige, and then we just go around this wheel. And this wheel already exists, but it moves at a sort of human pace. Once this wheel starts spinning at the exponential pace of AI improvements, and the AI gets smarter as you allocate more and more compute, and what you need to allocate more and more compute is more and more money, you see these divergences happening. And so a system that was always a little bit broken, well, it's always a lot broken, it becomes impossible to ignore the fact that it's broken. So it really comes back to this master parameter, this elasticity of substitution. Is this a foregone conclusion that sigma is greater than 1? No, there are interventions we can do as researchers, as scientists. We can enforce humans in the loop in various different places. We can say you have to train graduate students. Even if it's easier to just outsource that all to the GPU, I'm not giving you another grant unless you promise you're going to train grad students. We can raise the floor of human oversight across the board in different types of tasks. At the level of funders, we can flatten how we distribute research funds. We can use things like lotteries, which we know are actually effective, even though researchers don't want to admit they're effective, to ensure that everyone gets a chance to experience that exponential takeoff of AI-assisted research. And finally, the big thing is, if we want to change the behavior of researchers, we have to change the incentives of researchers. Right now, if my incentives are all productivity-based, as an economically rational actor, I'm going to be as productive as possible. If you start rewarding different things, like what you see in DORA, the Declaration on Research Assessment, like reproducibility, data, community-based research, then my behavior is going to change. So all of these things are choices we have to make. And there's a whole spectrum of possible outcomes. But at the two ends of the spectrum, path A is we don't do anything. Or we create a Senate subcommittee and we have a conversation and we have a consultation and we talk about people's feelings and we move at speed that universities usually move and granting agencies usually move. And very, very quickly, we're going to end up with a handful of super labs, no room for graduate apprenticeships, and just pure metric chasing. And all of the real discovery, all of the joy of discovery is going to be taken from humans and given to machines. The other way we can do this is making decisions now. As scholars, how we evaluate each other when it comes to promotion and tenure, when it comes to grants, as granting agencies, how we give out grants, how we evaluate grants. All of these are levers within our control. So we can construct a system where AI aids humans, but we center human agency, where we acknowledge human flourishing matters to us, including in academic research. We center human expertise and we ensure a broad distribution of resources. So I'm not at all worried about the future of the research endeavor if we do the right things. What I feel is a tremendous sense of agency at this particular moment in time. And the challenge is that it's really easy to say, Mark's overselling the case, AI really isn't that good. But the examples I gave you early on, none of those examples were true 2 years ago, when people were saying, no, AI is just hype, it's not really going to be a thing. It's accelerating exponentially. If I come back and talk to you next year, the examples are going to be out of this world. And so we actually have limited time to start steering towards path B instead of steering towards path A. But that is a collective endeavor. We all have to want that. Those are policy decisions that we can make, but we've got to make them quickly. Thank you very much for the invitation to chat.
Thank you very much, Mark. That gave us a lot to think about. And yes, there are many decisions we will need to make together. And that's part of why we're having this event, is to facilitate some of those conversations. So thanks very much, Mark.